Hi everyone, welcome to our Jupyter contributor call. Today is Wednesday, January 28th, and we have uh, some items from Mike on the agenda, so we will get started. Mike, please go ahead.
Yes. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
By the magic of repopulating the agenda, I'm first again. But if other people join in and want to switch to their topic, please do, because the topics that I have, I guess we could discuss all day. Uh, and those are basically about LLMs and how we ensure that the quality of our software and review queue stay well. The quality improves, review queue shortens, I guess. Uh, so to preface that, I've linked an issue that Jason opened on the governance repo, sharing that in the Slack as well, which links to various uh, reading resources and discussions in other parts of Project Jupyter around how the LLMs should be regulated, encouraged, discouraged, etc. I'm sure that different folks have different opinions, but I wanted to see if in this group of individuals there is any strong opinions on writing some guidance on top of what we already discussed. So we already merged the HSMD file, which if someone wants to use an LLM locally, that should hopefully result in better quality of code. Uh, but the problem that I think we face currently, uh, besides Jupyter being a complex piece of software, is that while the barrier of entry has been lowered by the developments in the LLM space, the reviewer capacity has not increased. And we see a lot of pull requests being opened, especially in preparation for potential Google Summer of Code, which is unrelated topic, but there's many people opening pull requests, and some of them make great use of their skills, some of them make great use of LLMs, and some of them don't really understand the conventions, or LLMs really do not have enough context, or basically we have both good and low quality pull requests, and reviewing them and catching uh, issues has become harder and harder just because of the volume. Maybe not just because of the volume, it's also that sometimes people use LLMs not only for writing code, but for writing replies. And it becomes really difficult to speak with a computer, really, because like when you get a message which was clearly written by an LLM, you don't really know where to begin. Like, how do I answer that? Uh, so I personally would love to establish some ground rules on like, okay, LLMs are fine for just as an example, LLMs are fine for writing code, but you should disclose that. LLMs are fine to do some copy editing to your message that you send as a comment, but please do not make the LLM reply to the reviewer because that's kind of rude. Um, so yeah, that's basically the first part of the discussion. I don't know anyone else has some comments. Go ahead, Omar.
Um, if I might, one thing, like as a meta point, I would suggest that whatever policy is written as a sort of restrictive allow list of, don't say this is LLMs are good for this, LLMs are uh, bad for that, but instead say due to load on reviewers and that sort of thing, uh, LLMs are currently only allowed for like X, Y, and Z, where X, Y, and Z are things that the use of LLMs isn't going to burden the reviewers. Because like it's really what you're getting at is we need firewalls and protections on the review queue so that you don't get overloaded. And it just seems like to me that the only way that you can have that is like with a strict allow list that LLMs are only allowed for like X, Y, and Z, where I don't have strong opinions on what X, Y, and Z are.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes sense. Like wording that explicitly stating the reason for why we would like these restrictions makes sense to me. And yeah, another example where LLMs are probably very good would be like writing tests. And I would like to offer some guidance, some more guidance. Like if people are using LLMs, let's ask the LLM to write the test first, commit that, and demonstrate in a draft PR that the test is failing, then commit the fix, because that would make the reviewer's job much easier, kind of validating the test in the first place.
Mike, I mean, I've also noticed this sort of issue with some recent, like looking at Jupyter PRs and things. Do you have any more concrete data on how big of a problem this is? It's really hard to subjectively like determine if a issue is an LLM based. I don't know, it feels more like a spidey sense than not, which I really don't like. I don't like trusting my judgment on whether I'm talking to an LLM or a human. Um, but I'm curious if you have a rough idea, in your opinion, how big this problem is. How many issues have you seen in the last
I
two,
think
3 weeks?
to me, it is a huge waste of time at times. Not speaking of JupyterLab right now, there were emails sent to our security mailing list with reports that were clearly generated by LLMs, which require a huge amount of time to validate the severe critical level vulnerability claims, but are very cheap and quick for LLMs to generate. So there's some kind of imbalance between the cost of sending a PR or sending an email versus the cost of screening that. That's what I'm getting at. I know that more and more people, and including people who I work with, use LLMs, and I think that those people, by the length of time that they were involved in software engineering, very easily came to uh, learn some kind of a good approach or reasonable approach, like when it's okay to use an LLM and when not. But for like totally new users who just registered on GitHub, for them navigating that is much harder. And again, it's subjective, but I think I would say that even majority of pull requests that we recently received were generated by LLMs or assisted by LLMs. And again, I'm not saying that that having a PR which was where there was some assistance from LLM is a bad thing. Sometimes it can be a very good thing. It's just that there is a this a disproportion between the cost of generating code and reviewing code.
Yeah, I agree with that. And to add a couple more points on like what makes you feel like something has been written by an LLM, it's really hard to tell in a very objective way. But when you start playing more with those tools, you really see the patterns kind of showing after a while. Like it's almost like this blog post, like where you always see the subtitle, why it matters. Like all of them, they have it. Like it's like you can instantly tell that it was like generated by an LLM. And with code, I think it's the same. Like I mean, yeah, like Mike said, like I think most of the recent PRs were just uh, yeah, heavily written by this, which is not a problem. Like if the LLM writes good stuff, but like sometimes you read the description and you clearly see like this is even the LLM wrote the PR description. Like the contributor didn't take the time to write it, themselves. So it's hard to say. Yeah, there is like no clear metric, like no proper kind of tool that would just say yes or no. Is it a LLM? It feels like it's more something like people need to kind of develop internally, right?
Well, one clear giveaway is that the code just doesn't compile. That's the bad LLM usage kind of stuff, which is due to the size of the code base. It is not trivial for an LLM to generate code which will pass all our linters straight ahead without actually running them locally, which is kind of a problem for me. Like I submitted this proposal for community-funded proposals that we will implement more linting crawls and will show that we are improving the state of the CI by showing that there's a decrease in number of filers on CI because more things are getting caught illy. But now I think there is some external force which will skew the metrics to. So yeah, statistics are hard. But yeah, going back to the problem of viewing stuff, um, I I think I'm reading the room that there's a consensus that we should have some kind of guidance for PRs or modify the templates and maybe link to a more detailed guide. I don't know if we should call that a guide or a policy, but
I think we can, but so I talked about this with someone else, like maintaining another open source project, and they were saying that uh, it's not going to prevent people to just open PRs. Like they are just going to ignore. Like they don't even read the docs, so they are just going to open the same number of PRs.
yes,
So I
but we can
yeah
close them and say
yeah okay
that
yeah you
doesn't
have to
follow.
yeah mm,
But because
yeah
right now that there is a number of PRs where I'm like, it's high cost for me to formulate a reply, which is kind and understanding to the like that person might not be very experienced, and I need to account for that I might not know that this is not okay in this context to use this tool. Now, if there is a checklist and they explicitly ignore the checklist, it kind of changes the dynamics, and we no longer have 10 PRs which are not answered and make us look bad that we didn't do anything. It just that the social cost of answering them was very high. It turns into, hey, you didn't follow the checklist, and maybe it will make the engagement more fruitful and quicker.
yes, but that doesn't prevent someone saying that they haven't used an LLM while they have, right? They can just still say, "Oh, I haven't," but in real, like they actually did use something, and then I don't know if it helps us make a decision on that, right?
I mean, I think we can assume a level of trust until proven otherwise. I'd rather go down that route. It seems more kind and respectful, but see how well, like voluntary disclosure helps.
Um, so I'm a recent uh, I'm a recent user of some of these things. I've avoided using them for quite a long time, and the pattern of adoption for me might also be mirrored in the public. Something like I first began going to the dedicated chat UIs on a web page and pasting in snippets of my code and asking a question here or there, right? So now I have a chat interface I'm running Copilot in VS Code, and I'm again just asking those questions and looking to see what it thinks, usually ignoring it, right? But more and more, it's like normalizing itself. And occasionally I'm like, yeah, I'll take that suggestion. I almost inevitably want to modify it. Um, it would be difficult, I think, other than something vague like what I just said, it would be difficult to answer some of the questionnaires like we might have seen in other places. Like Nick had above, I did use AI, this is the model, this is the prompt. I don't know. Today I tried 5 different models because I don't know what I'm doing. And I had a conversation and I ignored most of what I heard. I wouldn't know how to answer that question. So I just kind of wouldn't submit a PR if I'd done this and that form was in my way. But I was wondering, in these MD files we can put where we give models instructions, are we allowed to say if your code ends up in here, I don't know, add yourself as a co-author to each commit or something like that? Is there a way we can just intercept and have the model tell us that this happened?
Cloud does that, like that there's like co-authored by Claude. I don't know if that works anywhere else. I think also there is a distinction between kind of code which was written with assistance of an LLM and an entire pull request which was generated without human oversight. And the same goes for the comments and kind of the body of the comment field that you leave. Like the very minimum I don't want to see is that people are using LLMs to do everything for them. Like I don't want agents to be submitting PRs to our repositories, at least not just yet. But then, like, think a checkbox in the PR template saying, I'm not an LLM or it wasn't fully LLM generated also kind of feels, I don't know, disrespectful to people who are actually coming here and don't know the context of why this is a problem. And they actually wrote the code and they need to disclose that they are not a machine. Omar?
Yeah, so I think that the I see a pattern in the past couple comments. So one is uh, the flow that you were talking about, Ashwin, of using the LLM for yourself, where it's not directly doing anything with the code, it's just communicating with you. That to me seems perfectly fine, and like honestly, it's like none of our business. Like how you learn about the code and improve your own skills is just like a personal thing and doesn't seem like it affects the code base. And then the other thing is like on the flip side, what Mike was just saying of the LLM is doing everything. If the LLM is doing everything, then what is the contributor providing? They're like, why should we accept them to do stuff with the LLM that a maintainer of the project could just do themselves? If the maintainer thought the LLM was a useful thing, they could do it themselves. Why do we need a third-party contributor to just point the LLM at us? That doesn't really contribute anything. Whereas if the LLM is just educating and enhancing the contributor's own like mental model, and they're using it as like a cognitive multiplier for themselves, but they are the ones actually touching the code. The LLM isn't. That seems fine. So it seems like there's a distinction between of what is the LLM touching? Is the LLM touching the actual upstream project, or is the LLM just answering questions and communicating with the end user? And those seem like polar difference, like very different. And a good explanation of why one is that split is seems like a good explanation of why one is okay and the other isn't.
I think that's a perfect formulation of the problem with a fully automated PR that came from a machine. Like, there's a bunch of people heavily involved in the project who understand what the machines can do, and they could have pushed that button too. So, fair enough. That should be, I think, just easily disqualified for that reason. The more nuanced ones with, I don't know, code that really hasn't gone through the human filter, right? It's been generated, it's probably fine, but it's probably got, as Jeremy's noticed, a style or whatever. Like that stuff, that's a finer question to answer. So what do people think about that? That's not the easy case. That's the more complex case.
Yeah, it's there's also like um there's almost like like running CI for the first time, like GitHub doesn't run the workflows if it's a first time contributor. So it feels like if a PR comes from someone that has contributed before, I think the contributors would be less, annoyed by a code written by an LLM. But if it's coming from a single new person every time, like a new contributor or someone that joined GitHub yesterday, then this is where there is like a higher risk, right, of very sloppy code to be submitted. But there's no way for us to control that, right? So that, I mean, the only thing that exists is like this CI not running, kind of check that is built into GitHub, but there's no kind of similar check that would prevent someone from opening a PR unless they have, carefully checked boxes, right?
I mean, you could have something really naive and mechanical, like the size of your PR has to be proportional to how many other PRs you've done here before, or something. Like lines of code, you show up, new account, and lines of code you've changed are 700. It's unlikely you're gonna, I don't know. On the other hand, maybe you just like solved a problem that's 10 years old and it takes 700 lines and you're never going to come back. So I don't, I know the fear Jeremy's describing. I don't know if there's an easy naive answer, but maybe something like this one's flagged. It looks a little bit difficult to justify, but hey, there are edge cases. I'm not sure. No. Okay, forget yarn the lock files and all of that stuff. I'm talking about real, yeah.
Are we finding that it's ever like recurring users coming back and submitting like low effort for them, high effort for us PRs over and over, or is it, always new people?
There is sometimes people who submit 3 or 4. Basically, they go through new contributor issues, and one other problem that I saw is we have the mention that if you are submitting a PR for an issue for which there already is a PR, you should link to it and describe what does differently. But sometimes people just completely ignore it. And there have been PRs where I spent 4 or 6 hours reviewing them, and then I get a completely new PR, which kind of is starting from the beginning and has all the same issues that like first PR that I already spent my review hours on that issue. So it's disheartening, but yeah, a similar problem. But I don't want to discourage new contributors from opening multiple PRs if they feel like so. But maybe we should, I don't know, place limits that you shouldn't ever be opening more than, say, 3 PRs for a good new contributor issue. I don't know.
I'm thinking about maybe
It's
a list of folks who we are not interested in accepting future PRs from because of past PR behavior.
We can't block people. There probably should be a really high bar for that. I'm uncomfortable with a lot of these hard restrictions because I don't want to discourage human contributors. For the record, Mike, all the responses I've seen on PRs from you have been totally respectful, and I felt like very well done and everything. So if that was a worry of yours, like I see all of your responses as incredibly invested in helping people feel good.
My worry is I'm unable to respond to most of the PRs now. Because it just takes investment time, and also being non-native speaker, it takes me a little bit longer when I have to kind of engage not only on the code level but also on the social level to write a solid response.
I propose we start with just PR template disclosure, and that's something that we can point people to. That we have a box for negative, like Nick suggested, and a box for positive. And very lightweight, I put a proposal in the notes that no code in this PR was generated with AI. So this is just on PRs, and it's just talking about code that's generated, that made it into the PR. Just trying to, I would rather scope things just that as a data gathering, disclosure, like minimal level of disclosure, lightweight, things like that. So no code in this PR was generated with AI, or some code in this PR was generated with AI. I would like a checkbox that verifies that the author has carefully reviewed this code. One thing I've noticed is sometimes I'll use AI to generate some code. Often, I have to make the same code change in like 30 places or something and use an LLM to do that. And I'll go ahead and push it as a backup in a draft PR. But then I'll always go back and review it before asking for other reviews. So I'm happy to have people push code to a PR that's like, this is a backup of my PR. I haven't quite reviewed it yet, but I'm going to review it. So a separate checkbox saying I've carefully reviewed this code, and then some disclosure on the AI model.
Should there also be I have tested this code?
Sometimes CI is,
really
that's pretty broad.
It's extremely unreasonable for a lot of the stuff that is in this repo. I think if we could get draft in there first, right? So you don't come out if you just drop in, you roll up, you make a PR, it is not draft, close it. You have to at least review the interaction with your machine first. And you can ask, with the machine in the cloud. But I've run this code. No, you haven't. Not the way it's going to be run in CI. And so at least watch that first before you ask for help or on market draft or something like that. I don't know what to say about that.
So should we can add a note, I have carefully reviewed this code. Do not, make the PR reviewable or something, make the PR draft until this is checked or something. That gives some guideline to, it's okay if you have a draft PR, you're working on, etc., but keep it draft until you've reviewed it.
Yes, that would be a huge help in general if people who are opening things just to kind of signal that they start work were opening draft PRs. I actually wonder whether we could make GitHub default to drafts, so that you need to make 2 clicks to open a PR directly, and the first click is always draft.
I think it's a user preference rather than a repo preference, unfortunately. I don't think there's a way built into the UI settings, whatever, to do that. If, for example, I mostly do drafts first, right? Because I'm going to break CI the first time, because I always break CI the first time. The next time I come in, it will draft, so that would become a self-enforcing thing. But you know, I don't know if there's a bot way to do that. Like, basically, do you ever want to look at a PR while the CI is still running and gonna fail because the linter would find an easy issue that instead Galata is gonna find in an hour with 6 retries, you know, like, so, you know, why even get the email until it's done something useful, right? But yeah, sorry.
Nick called out this conversation is, as Mike suggested, could take days, hours. Can we start with a PR that adds that to the PR template?
Yeah, I will open that and will ask for lots of reviews from everyone who commented here, and we can continue that discussion offline. I'd like to yield to Rosia and then come back to other bullet point about using automated review and in general improving the quality of software.
Thanks, Mike. I just had a question here to get some feedback from the people on this call. I'm interested in hosting a community call in December. I'm sorry, February. I'm interested in hosting a call in February, and I was wondering what people's thoughts would be about hosting it during this meeting time, February 25th. If that seems reasonable, or if there are some concerns about the time. Okay. Okay, yeah. Thanks, Nick. Yeah, it doesn't take up the accessibility slot from the first, being the first call of the month. Okay, I think as part of the process, I think I'll open up an issue in the maybe the JupyterLab repository, just kind of making this like question, the same question, and in case there's any people that would like be interested in providing some text feedback or anything like that. And I will share it here in the next call, just as I guess a courtesy, but I think I'm not hearing any opposition to that plan, so I think I might start planning for that date. If that sounds good.
Sounds great. Thank you very much, Rosia.
I'll yield back to you, Mike.
Okay. So let me start talking about automating reviews. I want to automate myself out of my job. There is an option to request a co-pilot for a review, and it comments back, suggests some changes. It works reasonably well. Sometimes it has good insights. It catches typos. Honestly, I never found it super useful, but it was somewhat useful, and it would probably cover 40 to 70% of the feedback that I need to provide on like first time contributor requests. I don't know if that's very nice of an experience to have a bot review your PR, and I don't know if like a human reviewer can be very nice and compassionate. I don't know if, like, I guess with some prompting, even a copilot could try to be nice, but it kind of feels different. So my first question would be, would anyone object to me like clicking this review with Copilot on JupyterLab PRs?
Do you know if there's costs associated with that?
I believe there is not. we were trying to understand the costing of that, and the usage of Copilot agents and of the more expensive models are built in some way, but the basic Copilot reviews I understand are free for open source projects.
I'm happy to try it out.
The more stricter version of this proposal is, would anyone object to me enabling that every PR gets automatically reviewed by Copilot?
Wait, the other one was that we can tag it in with a comment or something?
Yeah, the first one is that a reviewer, say myself, you, Jeremy, JupyterLab, whenever a PR comes in and they feel like this is a good option, they just click this Copilot button and we give it a go and see how it goes.
Can we
The
start
other
with
one
that?
is we
Yeah.
enable it automatically in GitHub settings and
Yeah,
don't have to think about it.
Let's start with the opt-in. I'd love to try it out and see how useful it feels.
I think it would be useful to know like what kind of reviews it does first. I also tried it on other repos, and sometimes it can be very verbose. So you end up like with tons of comments. I don't know if there is like an easy way to hide them afterwards, probably, but it adds a bit of noise sometimes. Not always. I don't know if it's also something that we can prompt.
So I know that some of these tools have options to both adjust the prompt and adjust the threshold for like how confident they need to be before they present the comment and suggestion. So I've linked a couple of them for the interest of anyone who's watching, as ellipsis.dev, cubic.dev, and graphite. I know that there is more, but these three kind of stood the trial of time. At least these are the ones that I see people actually use. I know maybe there's more. So one thing is we could try Copilot and see whether it provides suggestions which are of any usefulness for this code base. Maybe it's useful in other contexts, but not in kind of JupyterLab or Jupyter in general code which is written in specific languages. I think it will still be useful. But there are tools, dedicated tools, which compete with Copilot and have a lot of interest in being much better than it, because it's the entire business model, and for Copilot, it's just one part of the business. So I also wonder whether we should just go ahead and try one of the other tools, especially if they are free. Does anyone have any experience with one of those three?
Do you
Eric,
know
no?
how we will need to register? Like, would that be as individual or as a Jupyter project directly?
I suppose an admin would need to give permission for it to comment. Like, I think this is all automated, but yes, one of the problems that I had previously and reason why I didn't try some of these is because they required too many permissions on the org level or the GitHub account level, and I just didn't want to risk that with many of them being not very mature projects. I think this has improved, and it's much kind of higher bar using that in private repositories versus public repositories, but there's still like potential access to I don't know if they would have access to the private folks that I use for security vulnerabilities, but that's probably something that we should review and consider. Whereas Copilot is as safe as kind of you can be like you either trust GitHub or not.
Yeah, they seem to deepen their integration of all of the whole Copilot thing. I just noticed today that they seem to have added like a new agents tab on repos now. Like unless someone like enabled it, like you can start now tasks from the GitHub UI directly. But yeah, I'm also a bit I'm wondering like what would happen if we enable more than just Copilot as reviewers. Like, would that be too much? Maybe we could just
Yeah,
start with Copilot. Yeah.
I have a link somewhere to a repository where someone was playing with that idea, kind of like it was one person startup who did a lot of code, and they had 8 different reviewing agents enabled. So I had a lot of feedback. It was fun to watch, but also very interesting to learn about these different tools. I think that might be a bit too much for new contributors, kind of to manage and understand what feedback they should be listening to, and kind of like that there is also the problem of false positives, because if we see something which doesn't make sense, having to expend a lot of time in this code base, we can filter that out easily. But if an LLM suggests some action which doesn't make sense, it might lead to the person who opened the PR wasting their time, which we should respect. So maybe that's actually a good argument for not enabling auto reviews and having someone click on the button, and then they should screen the feedback and kind of comment out or resolve immediately any suggestions which are of low quality. Okay, so the action item is anyone who feels like feels like reviewing pull requests can request the Copilot, and we will report back in a couple of weeks with empirical results on how it went, and then maybe evaluate other tools. I also had one more thought about like stricter requirements for tests. One thing that I'm working on is making sure that our integration test Galata runs faster, but that's kind of long-term project. It will take a couple of months. Short term, when it comes to just writing tests, because writing code is faster with LLMs, I wonder if we should encourage or require that both unit tests and integration tests are added for new features. For bugs, that there is at least a unit test or an integration test. Because so far, I think this is not codified. Like there's this practice that I would always ask someone to add one or the other, but I almost never ask for both unless this is like really a substantial feature, because I just want to be respectful, and I don't want to demand too much. And if something is covered already, uh, it feels not at some level difficult to ask them for even more. But strictly speaking, it would improve the chance of catching regressions and would lead to a better quality. So if we could, it feels like this is the right thing to require both unit and integration tests if generating them has become easier. And I see people use LLMs to generate playwright tests, which is, I think, useful, or at least write snippets. I don't know. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, they don't run out of CI. You can't pass. with the screenshots and no controlled fonts and browsers, you can't. I mean, I don't know how you can ask for that. Like,
Yes, that's difficult for a person running Linux or macOS to generate the tests and the snapshots. So I would say yes, that's a problem currently. But once we have much smoother and faster feedback loop on CI, the generation of the final snapshot should not be a problem because it can be quickly updated by a bot. And the other approach is to say that the test should not actually be, the integration test should not be dependent on screenshots as the main way of ensuring correctness.
yeah, I mean, if you're in Jest and Playwright, the way that we would assess that would be the accessibility tree. That's the thing, right? Like, we should figure out how to use that as the effective snapshot mechanism.
Yes, absolutely. And besides of that, you can write functional tests which validate the behavior. Just looking at the simple things,
Yeah.
inputs, outputs.
And so I think the thing there is, and let's not get another SaaS involved that has a history of leaking secrets, but doing that with coverage is the way, right? So I don't know if we're pulling that from the baseline unit test at this point. I don't know if we're pulling that from Galata, but like that's the answer because it tells you where you're missing.
Can you
Right.
actually pull that from Playwright?
Hell yeah. I mean, you can pull it. All right. So you can pull it directly from a Chromium-based browser. You can pull it directly from that. You then have to apply source transforms and all kinds of crazy stuff to get back to what it actually is. I have not tried to do this with RSPack, but RSPack can also build you an instrumented build. And so, then you get into the discussion of like, is it relevant to have things with timers on them that are trying to run instrumented code that's 5 times bigger, no lie, than your production asset, right? So that's a bummer. But, if it's not performance sensitive, right, it's going to do the right thing. But yeah, Istanbul JS works like a boss. It tells you which lines in your .tsx or .svelte or whatever the hell you're writing, which lines are not covered. And you establish a baseline. You store that baseline on GitLab pages or GitHub pages or read the docs or whatever, someplace where your CI can get it. And then you compare against that. And if you introduce regressions, then you report those as a little markdown file. We don't need to, as I said, let's not go to CodeCov or one of those other things because problems. But yeah, I have some examples of lab extensions that do that. And it sucks. It's really painful. But if you're spending an hour running your tests, right, you could at least get some data out of it as to, in the context of the change, what impact did that have? I don't know. I'll look at whether the RSPack stuff can already do that.
But that's cool. I didn't know that you can do that, but I would be quite curious to get kind of an overview of which things are covered and which are not on the maybe package by package level. I guess I wouldn't be interested in lines of code for Playwright itself for the tests, but if there are packages which we are not covering, having a way to surface that information easily could be useful, I think. Okay. I think that's all we have time for today. Next time, I'd also like to brainstorm maybe a broader topic of ensuring that new releases of Jupyter software do not break extensions and that the ecosystem works well together, which is something that we discussed previously, but I wonder if we should revisit that and maybe explore solutions that might be possible now and were not possible back then.
Okay, thanks, Mike. We are at the end of the agenda as well. I only have a couple minutes, so I will stop our recording soon. Thanks everyone for joining us, and we will be here next week.